It happened so fast that I didn't register it until the sting hit my cheek and the entire restaurant fell silent. One moment, I was sliding past her chair to return from the restroom, and the next, the sound cracked through the private dining room like a gunshot. My stepmother had slapped me, hard, in front of everyone. Then she leaned in, her breath warm and bitter against my ear, and hissed, "You're just like your mother." I froze, my face burning, not just from the slap, but from the humiliation, from the betrayal. I turned to look at my father, sitting just 2 chairs down, fork hovering above his plate. He didn't even look up. He was staring into his mashed potatoes like they held the secrets of the universe. Nobody moved. Not Lydia, my stepmother's daughter. Not the waiter who had just set down a tray of bread. Not my uncle, not the cousins, not the old family friend who used to call me kiddo. It was as if everyone had collectively decided to pretend they hadn't seen what had just happened. And my father, my only parent left, was the loudest in his silence. That's when I knew something inside me had shifted, not broken. Broken would have been easier to fix. This was worse. This was something unraveling, thread by thread, until there was nothing left to hold on to. I didn't say anything. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just turned and walked out. The heels of my boots, clicking against the tile, were the only sound that followed me out the door. I didn't stop in the lobby. I didn't stop in the parking lot. I got in my car, turned the ignition, and drove without really thinking. 20 minutes later, I was sitting on the edge of the bed in my Airbnb, coat still on, hands still shaking. I stared at the floor for a long time. The city outside buzzed with a Friday night rhythm. Cars, laughter, footsteps, distant music, but none of it reached me. That dinner was supposed to be a gesture, a peace offering, a stupid, naive hope that maybe, just maybe, I could have one night where we pretended to be a normal family. It was my father's 60th birthday, a milestone. I hadn't been home in over a year, and before that, maybe once or twice in passing. We kept in touch through polite texts, Merry Christmas, Happy Birthday, but we hadn't really talked since I was 22. I thought maybe showing up would mean something. Maybe if I smiled enough, dressed right, stayed quiet, I could survive the night. The restaurant was some trendy place off Pearl Street, upscale Italian, dim lights, moss art on the walls. Our party filled half the private dining room. I had been seated near the end of the table, close to Lydia. We'd never been close, Sabrina made sure of that, but that night Lydia looked tired, older, like she was carrying something heavy. She even smiled at me once. A real one, not the fake polite kind. I remember thinking, that's new. We were halfway through dinner when it happened. I had gotten up to use the restroom and was returning to my seat. A waiter passed by with a tray of drinks, and I instinctively shifted to the side to avoid him. In doing so, my shoulder lightly brushed the back of Sabrina's chair. Barely a nudge. Not enough to spill a drink or jostle her plate, but it was enough for her to feel it, enough for her to unleash everything she had been holding in for years. The slap wasn't about that moment. It was about every moment before it, every eye roll, every disagreement, every time I refused to play along with the story she'd written for our lives. And the words that followed, "You're just like your mother." They weren't meant as an insult to my mother. They were meant to wound me. Deeply. They did. But what stayed with me, what still keeps me awake some nights, was the way my father sat there unmoving while it happened. Like it was routine. Like it was acceptable. Like I was the one making a scene by existing. For a second, I waited for him to say something. To look at me. To blink. But he didn't. He didn't even flinch. And I knew in that moment that I was done pretending. My mother died when I was 16. Ovarian cancer. It was long, slow, cruel. The kind of illness that eats away not just at the body, but at the soul of a house. She held on as long as she could, always smiling through the pain, still packing my school lunches and tucking notes into my coat pocket that said things like, "Be kind today," or "Don't forget how bright you are." I used to pretend I was annoyed by them, but I kept every single one, Even now, they're folded inside a small metal box in my closet. The last one she ever gave me simply said, "You're enough." She passed in late autumn. The trees were still holding on to their leaves, like they hadn't gotten the news yet. I remember the funeral was small, mostly close friends, some neighbors, a few old colleagues of my dad. I stood next to him while he greeted people, my hands cold even in gloves. He didn't cry, not once. I told myself that was strength, that he was holding it together for me. But the truth was, something inside him shut off. And just like that, our house went quiet. What I didn't expect was how quickly the silence was filled. By spring, she was there. Her name was Sabrina Lowell. She had worked with my father back when he was still teaching business ethics at the university. I vaguely remembered her. She always wore navy blazers and stilettos, even on casual Fridays. She had a way of tilting her head when she listened, like she was always calculating something, and a voice so calm it made you feel rude for disagreeing. She came over once, then again, then suddenly she was there all the time. First, it was helping Dad get back on his feet, then organizing the pantry, repainting the walls, rearranging furniture. Within a few months, she'd moved in. No conversation, no permission, just presence. And with her came Lydia. Lydia was 5 years younger than me, from Sabrina's first marriage. She was the golden child, the polite one, the one who called my father Dad within a month and got extra helpings of dessert. She was everything I wasn't: compliant, quiet, wide-eyed. I didn't blame her. Not then. Not yet. At first I tried. I really did. I said, "Good morning," helped set the table, smiled when Sabrina brought home new pillows and said they'd soften the energy of the living room. I tried to ignore the way she'd sigh when I left dishes in the sink or tell my dad I was grieving too selfishly. I told myself she just didn't understand me yet. But it wasn't misunderstanding. It was calculation. She started slowly, subtle jabs disguised as concern. "Claire seems withdrawn. Claire's a bit moody these days. Maybe she needs counseling. I mean, grief can make teenagers so reactive." And every time I pushed back, I could see the wheels turning behind her smile. Every time I raised my voice, she'd go quiet and let my father do the disciplining. He never asked for my side, never once said, "Claire, are you okay?" It didn't take long before I stopped speaking altogether. I went to school. I came home. I did my homework in my room with the door closed. I wore headphones to dinner. I applied to colleges without telling anyone. I got into a state university, 6 hours away. I accepted the scholarship before my father even noticed the acceptance letter on the counter. When I told him I was leaving, he said, "That's probably for the best. A fresh start might help." A fresh start. I packed everything I owned into 2 suitcases and left the same week. No going away dinner. No hug. Sabrina didn't even come downstairs. I remember standing on the porch, watching my father sip coffee at the kitchen table, and wondering if he'd ever really seen me. I didn't look back when I drove away. I just drove faster than I should have, windows down, hair whipping in the wind like I was running from something that might catch up if I stopped for even a second. And for a while it worked. I built a life. I got my degree, found a job in publishing, rented a studio apartment with peeling wallpaper and mismatched silverware. I went to therapy sometimes. Mostly I worked. I stayed busy. That's what people said to do. Keep going. Keep moving. But what they never tell you is the silence doesn't go away. It just waits. For a dinner. For a slap. For a moment when everything you tried to bury comes clawing back up through the surface, demanding to be seen. That night, sitting on the edge of my rented bed in a city that no longer felt like home, I realized something. I hadn't run far enough. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, coat still on, staring at nothing. My cheek still burned faintly where her hand had landed, but the heat had moved deeper, into the parts of me I thought I'd numbed years ago. I opened my laptop without really knowing what I was doing. At first, it was just going to be a journal entry. something to pour the venom out of me. But the more I typed, the more I realized how much I had kept inside. The slap was just the final insult. The real pain had been happening for years, silently, and I had carried it like a secret no one wanted to hear. I didn't use real names. I changed the city, blurred the timeline, and posted it under an old account I hadn't touched since grad school. The subreddit was one I'd followed for years, r/raised by narcissists. I'd read other people's stories late at night, feeling seen without ever having to speak. This time I spoke. I described the dinner, the slap, the way my father stared at his plate like it was a script he didn't know how to rewrite. I talked about my mother, how gentle she was, how fast she disappeared. I told them about Sabrina moving in before the dust even settled, about the silence, the slow erasure of my place in my own home. I ended the post with a single sentence. I left that dinner like I left that house years ago, unseen. I closed the laptop and didn't check it again until the next afternoon. I don't know what I expected. Maybe a few comments, a couple of upvotes, some stranger saying, "You're not crazy," but it had exploded. Thousands of upvotes, hundreds of comments, people sharing their own stories, people saying they believed me, that they'd lived through the same kind of slow suffocation, that silence is a survival tactic, that not reacting doesn't mean nothing happened, it means everything happened. I sat there reading them, eyes burning, not from pain, but from something close to recognition. For the first time, I wasn't just the difficult daughter. I was someone whose story made sense. And then, I saw it, a private message, from a username I didn't recognize at first. But the profile picture, barely visible, was of a coffee cup on a marble countertop I'd seen 1,000 times before. My stomach twisted. Lydia. The message was short. No punctuation. No flourish. Claire, I read your post. I know it's you, and I believe everything. Can we talk? I stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it, pretend I hadn't seen it. Another part, the louder one, was curious, maybe even hopeful. We met the next morning at a little cafe near Pearl Street, the same street where the dinner had imploded. It felt fitting. I got there early and waited by the window, watching pedestrians stroll by with dogs, coffee cups, puffer jackets, zipped up to their ears. And then she walked in. She looked nothing like I remembered. No makeup. No curated curls. No designer scarf. Just a hoodie and jeans and dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept in days. She looked like someone who'd been through something real. She sat down across from me without a word. And for a moment, we just stared at each other. Two people who had grown up in the same house but never shared the same version of it. Then she spoke. "I didn't know," she said softly. "Not really." I didn't say anything. I didn't trust my voice to hold steady. She always acted different around me. I thought she was just strict with you, or that maybe you were just difficult. That's what she said. She said a lot of things, I said. Lydia nodded slowly. But that night, when she slapped you, something cracked. Everyone saw it. The way she looked at you, like you were a threat, not a person. And Dad, he didn't even blink. That's when I knew this wasn't about a chair. It never was. It wasn't an apology. It didn't need to be. It was something better. An alignment. A fracture finally acknowledged. "She's been controlling everything for so long," Lydia continued. "Even me. I didn't realize it until I moved out. Even then, I thought it was just how she was. But I see it now. I see it all." She paused, looked down at her coffee cup, then back at me. "Do you still have that post?" "Yes." "Then let's do something with it." I blinked. "Like what?" Her jaw tightened. "Not revenge. Just truth." We didn't tell anyone we were coming. Not Dad. Not Sabrina. We waited until they returned home from that same dinner, full and tipsy, expecting silence and leftovers. Instead, they walked into a living room lit with soft lamps and quiet determination. Lydia was already there, seated on the couch, shoulders back like she had rehearsed this. I stood by the fireplace, arms crossed. In front of us, on the coffee table, sat a thick folder, cream-colored, unassuming, but inside it was everything. The moment the front door opened, I felt something in the air shift. Static, like the room was waiting to inhale. They entered mid-conversation. Sabrina talking, Dad nodding absently, keys jangling in his hand. When he saw us, he froze, keys still in midair, eyes darting from me to Lydia to the folder. Sabrina took one look at the setup and stopped talking. Her expression didn't change at first, but her shoulders tensed ever so slightly. She already knew. She always knew. "What is this?" Dad asked, voice lower than usual. He didn't sit. Not yet. He just stared at the folder like it might bite him. "Something you need to see," Lydia said. Sabrina's expression hardened. "More drama," she said, voice sharp. "Really?" No, my voice was calm. Cold. Just the truth. Dad looked at me, then at Lydia, then slowly moved toward the couch. He sat down, reached for the folder. The first page was a printout of the Reddit post. I had removed any usernames, adjusted details to protect others, but the heart of it was intact. The dinner, the slap, the years leading up to it. He read in silence, page after page, each word draining the color from his face. His hands trembled slightly as he turned the sheets. Pink, pale, then something closer to ash gray. Sabrina stood nearby, arms folded, lips pressed into a thin line. I could see her scanning the room, already calculating the angle. She was always 2 steps ahead until now. "This is absurd," she finally snapped. "You're both being ridiculous. She's always been like this. Dramatic, vindictive, obsessed with painting me as the villain." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Lydia leaned forward and turned the next page for Dad. A screenshot of a text Sabrina had sent 2 years ago. "Your sister will always be a problem until your father finally sees her for what she is." An ungrateful version of her dying mother. The silence that followed was the kind that throbbed in your ears. Dad read the message once, then again. Sabrina flinched, just slightly, when she realized which text it was. "That was taken out of context," she barked. "It was a joke, a bad one." "Do I look like I'm laughing?" Lydia said, voice steady. Dad kept flipping. Letters, handwritten, from my mother. Ones I'd found tucked in a drawer, sealed in an envelope marked for Claire someday. She had written them during her last summer. In one, she described feeling uneasy about Sabrina, that the friendship had shifted, that she sensed something deeper. "I'm afraid for Claire," she wrote. "If I'm not here, who will protect her?" My father stared at the letter for a long time. Then he closed the folder. Sabrina saw the opportunity in the silence and lunged. "She's poisoning you," she said to him, gesturing toward me. "She's always been jealous. She's held on to this twisted version of the past because she can't move on." "She didn't slap herself," Lydia said quietly. Sabrina's eyes narrowed. "You're siding with her now? Don't think I haven't noticed how cold you've been lately." Her tone had shifted, less defense, more offense. It was her signature pivot. Divide and conquer. "I'm not siding," Lydia said. "I'm remembering." And then she looked at Dad. "That night," she said, "was the first time I saw who you really are. The way you looked at Claire. Or didn't. Like it was normal. Like she deserved it." Still, Dad said nothing. His jaw clenched, his breathing shallow. Then finally he stood. Not fast, not dramatic. Just stood, like someone shedding an invisible weight. He turned toward Sabrina. "You told me Claire was exaggerating," he said. "That she was difficult. That she couldn't accept you because she was angry at the world. She was—" Sabrina spat. "She left because she couldn't stand not being the center anymore." "She was 16, he replied. Sabrina's face twisted. "I gave everything to this family," she said. "You think I tolerated her attitude. Your silences, Your guilt for fun? I carried this house while you wallowed." He didn't respond. She waited. Still nothing. And then she picked up her purse. "This is pathetic," she said, voice shaking now. "I'm done here." She walked out, slammed the door behind her. The sound echoed. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt final. Dad sat down slowly. Lydia curled into the corner of the couch like she used to when she was a kid. And I just stood there. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to explain, to defend, to beg for someone to believe me. Everything had already been said. But the hardest part was just beginning. We didn't hear from her for a few days. The house was quiet in the way old houses get quiet when something ugly has finally left. Less haunted, but not healed. Dad moved slowly, like someone relearning how to move through his own space. Lydia came by every other day. We didn't talk much. It was too soon for words. But we stayed, and that meant something. Then the letter arrived. Cream envelope. No return address. Legal formatting. Thick paper. My name wasn't on it, but Dad called me the moment he opened it. "She's not finished," he said. And she wasn't. Sabrina had filed for legal separation, and with it came a list of demands so bold I laughed when I saw them. She wanted spousal support. She wanted full ownership of the house. And she wanted, bizarrely, my mother's antique teacup collection. Hand-painted porcelain pieces passed down from my great-grandmother. She claimed my mother had gifted them to her before passing. She said that. I asked, stunned. "Put it in writing," Dad replied, holding up the letter. It was audacious, absurd, and yet it was exactly like her. When emotional manipulation failed, she went legal. When shame didn't work, she went for entitlement. But this time, she underestimated what we had. Lydia reached out to a friend, Samira Patel, a family law attorney who specialized in high-conflict separations. She came over that same afternoon. Late 30s, blunt-cut hair, no-nonsense energy. We laid it all out. The timeline, the text messages, the letters, the diary entries, the estate records, and most importantly, the deed. "The house was purchased before your father married her," Samira confirmed. "There's no co-ownership, no transfer, no legal claim to the property." "And the teacups?" I asked, half expecting her to roll her eyes. Instead, she smiled. "Do you have any documentation?" she asked. I did. When we cleared the basement last month, I found a box labeled in my mother's handwriting, for Claire when she turns 30. Inside was an itemized inventory of valuables. Next to each one was a name. The teacups? Claire Jennings. Samira nodded. "This isn't going to go the way she thinks." We didn't tell Sabrina. We waited. Mediation was scheduled for the following week. She arrived early. Beige suit, hair in a tight bun, a lawyer at her side, a younger man with nervous eyes and a stack of folders he barely glanced at. She didn't look at us. She didn't need to. Her confidence was radiating like perfume. Until Samira began. She opened with the Reddit post, sanitized, anonymized, but printed and included in the packet. Attached was a signed statement from the family therapist Lydia and I had consulted, detailing the emotional distress, the trauma, the years of suppression. Then came the photos, the texts, the letters, the estate document from my mother, the deed, each item laid out one by one, like a quiet reckoning. I watched Sabrina's face carefully. She didn't react at first, but as the stack grew higher, I saw the tension shift in her jaw. Her lips pressed together. Her knuckles turned white where they gripped the arm of her chair. Samira's tone didn't change once. "We are willing to resolve this quietly," she said. "No public dispute. No further legal pursuit. But it must be on record that she receives nothing from the house. None of the items listed in the will. And no spousal support." Her tone sharpened. "If she declines, we are prepared to countersue for emotional damages, wrongful interference with estate assets, and intentional infliction of distress. We will also submit the full documentation to relevant family and community contacts as necessary. Sabrina didn't speak. Her lawyer leaned toward her, whispered something. She didn't look at him. She looked at my father, who didn't look back. That was the moment. Her mask cracked, not from guilt, not from sorrow, but from realization. There would be no negotiation, no spinning, no performance. This was the end. She nodded once, and just like that, it was over. The weeks that followed were quiet, not empty, just still, like the dust had finally settled. But instead of revealing ruins, it showed the shape of something we hadn't really seen before. What we'd lived in for years wasn't a home. It was a performance, and the curtain had finally dropped. Sabrina moved out of town. We heard she was staying in a condo near Lakewood, spinning her side of the story to whoever would listen. But fewer people were listening now. Too many had seen the truth. And the house changed. Dad started therapy. Voluntarily. He called me once a week, sometimes twice. We didn't always talk about deep things. Sometimes it was just about the weather, a memory of my mom, or a recipe he tried and ruined. But something about the way he listened now, present, open, felt like the father I used to imagine he could be. Lydia and I grew close in a way I never expected. We were never meant to be sisters, not in the world Sabrina tried to build. But once we stripped that version away, we found something real. We started going through old photos together. She showed me the postcards she used to hide under her mattress. I let her read my mom's letters. We cried over the same losses. And for the first time, we weren't alone in them. One afternoon, we took the antique teacups out of their box. Delicate porcelain, hand-painted roses, initials etched in gold at the base of each cup. MJ from Margaret Jennings, my mom. Lydia brewed herbal tea and handed me one carefully. We sat by the window, legs curled up like kids, sipping in silence. I used to think you were the strong one, she said suddenly. I looked over. You left. You got out. I thought you were angry and cold, but you were just trying to survive. I didn't know what to say. For so long, I'd carried the label of the difficult one, the moody daughter, the problem. Hearing her say that felt like someone handing me back a piece of myself I'd almost forgotten. My dad never asked us to move in, but one evening, as we stood in the kitchen drying dishes, he turned and said, I want you to have part of this house. I blinked. What? It's what your mother would have wanted. It's what I should have done a long time ago. A week later, the paperwork was signed. 50% transferred to me. There was no celebration, no champagne, no social media post, just quiet, and that was enough. No revenge speech, no public takedown, just the truth, laid bare and standing firm. Sometimes revenge doesn't need to be loud. Sometimes it's just the silence that follows after the lie collapses, the peace that settles in when the truth is finally allowed to breathe. Sometimes revenge is drinking tea out of your mother's porcelain cups in the house someone tried to steal, your name on the deed, your sister in the guest room, and knowing they can never take any of it away again.
The world keeps turning, and with each turn comes a new story. When one door closes, another opens, leading us into a journey entirely different. Let us set aside the echoes of the tale just past and step together into a new realm where another destiny awaits to be told. And now I invite you to listen to the second story, a path of its own, unrelated to what came before, yet filled with mysteries and surprises meant only for those willing to journey onward with me.
The note on my kitchen counter was written in my mother's tidy, unmistakable cursive. Just one sentence, nothing more. Sorry, sweetie. We just couldn't take care of her. For a moment, I stood frozen in my scrubs, the plastic ID badge for my ER shift still hanging from my collar. The house was silent. No laughter, no music, no little footsteps running toward me. Just silence and that damn note taped to the granite. I dropped my keys and tore through the house, calling out, Eliza? Mom? Dad? But every room was empty. Her backpack was gone. So was her nightlight. The unicorn blanket She refused to sleep without. Gone too. I tried calling my parents. Straight to voicemail. Again and again. That's when my phone buzzed, not from them, but from a social media notification. My sister, Savannah, had posted a photo. My father in sunglasses, arm around Jackson and Madison, my niece and nephew. All of them standing on a beach in matching Hawaiian shirts, smiling with drinks in their hands. The caption read, "Surprise family trip? So lucky to have the best grandparents in the world." They'd left for Hawaii, with Savannah and her kids, while my daughter, my 8-year-old, was missing. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even breathe for a moment. I just stared at the photo. Then I picked up my phone and made the one call that would end with police pounding on their hotel room door across the Pacific. Before everything unraveled, my life was already complicated, but it was a kind of chaos I had learned to manage. I was 32, an ER nurse at Mercy Hill Hospital in St. Augustine, Florida. My shifts were long, often stretching past midnight, but the work gave me purpose. I had become skilled at guiding strangers through their worst days. I just never saw my own storm coming. Eliza was born 8 years ago, during my final semester of nursing school. Her father, Connor Davis, and I were newly married and completely unprepared. He was still finishing his business degree. We were broke, overwhelmed, and terrified. But when I held Eliza for the first time, none of that mattered. She was mine. A tiny, wriggling miracle with wispy red curls and eyes that never seemed to blink. From that moment on, I promised her everything I had. We tried to make it work. Connor took a job in marketing after graduation and quickly became obsessed with networking events, client dinners, and late-night strategy meetings. I noticed the signs before I was ready to admit them. Perfume on his shirts, missed calls from numbers saved as first names only, a distance in his eyes even when he was home. When I finally confronted him, he didn't lie. He didn't apologize either. He just said he needed more freedom. Our divorce was finalized 3 months later. He got the downtown apartment. I got primary custody and child support that came late more often than not. We settled into a rhythm, Eliza and me. Mornings were chaotic, evenings were sacred. No matter how late my shift ended, I never skipped our bedtime routine. Teeth brushed, story read, and then our brave talk, where we each shared one thing that scared us that day. Hers were usually spiders or spelling tests. Mine were more abstract, missing too much, not being enough, losing her. My parents, Douglas and Irene Rivers, lived just outside town in Palmview. My father had retired from his accounting firm with plenty of savings, and my mother, once a respected school principal, spent most of her time organizing book clubs and brunches. To outsiders, they looked like model grandparents, kind, generous, involved. But inside our family, the picture was never quite that perfect. They had a favorite, always had. Savannah, my younger sister by 4 years, could do no wrong. She'd followed the plan: college, career, perfect wedding to Bradley, a well-paid attorney. She worked part-time as an interior designer and spent most days at home with Jackson and Madison. My parents doted on them like royalty. Birthday gifts, ballet recitals, custom Halloween costumes, surprise weekend getaways. They were showered with attention and affection. Eliza and I, we were tolerated, included out of obligation, never excitement. I told myself it was subtle that I was overthinking, but even Eliza noticed. One day after Christmas, as we drove home in silence, she asked, "Mom, do Grandma and Grandpa like me the same as the other kids?" My chest tightened. I wanted to lie. I wanted to protect her, but I couldn't say yes. The signs had been there for years, like hairline cracks in a wall I pretended not to see. But once I let myself look, really look, it all became impossible to ignore. When Jackson turned 10, my parents threw him a backyard party with rented inflatables, a magician, and personalized goodie bags. Eliza's birthday had been 2 months earlier. She'd gotten a discount craft set and a half-hearted happy birthday over a dinner none of them attended. When I brought it up, Mom said she must have written the wrong date on the calendar and told me not to be dramatic. The winter recital was another slap. Madison's first ballet performance. My parents drove 3 hours, booked a hotel, and posted photos with captions like, "So proud of our little star." Eliza's piano recital was the following weekend, just 15 minutes from their house. They didn't come. Mom said they'd already RSVP'd to a neighborhood potluck. Even holidays, which were supposed to be joyful, became exercises in quiet survival. The dinner table was always lined with Jackson and Madison's favorite dishes: cheesy potatoes, honey-glazed carrots, homemade brownies. When Eliza developed a gluten sensitivity, I emailed Mom in advance, offered to bring her a separate dish. But on Thanksgiving, everything on the table was drenched in wheat, and Mom just smiled and said, "I'm sure she can find something to eat." Eliza quietly picked at plain lettuce and turkey slices while everyone else devoured rolls and stuffing. She didn't complain, but I watched her smile tighten. I saw her check out. I tried to speak up more than once. "Mom, I've noticed that you seem more involved with Savannah's kids than with Eliza." "Don't be ridiculous," she'd replied, barely looking up from folding a new wardrobe of doll clothes for Madison. "We love all our grandchildren equally. Victoria just makes it easier to be involved. She includes us more." But that wasn't true. I'd sent invitations. I'd shared school calendars. I'd called. I'd begged. The truth was I wasn't Savannah. I hadn't followed their map, hadn't married someone they approved of, hadn't lived in a 2-story house with a matching doormat and seasonal wreaths. Still, I clung to hope. I told myself they cared in their own way, that they were older, tired, overwhelmed, that it wasn't personal, until the week of the accident, until I needed help, not with favors or parties or gifts, but with something simple, with care, with love. 3 nights. That's all I asked. The call came halfway through my 3rd consecutive night shift. My legs ached, my eyes burned, and the trauma, they hadn't been quiet in 12 hours. A 5-car pileup on I-95 had filled every room in the ER. I'd just handed off my last patient when my personal phone vibrated in my pocket. The screen lit up with Eliza's school name, Pine Creek Elementary. At first, I assumed it was a schedule reminder, maybe a field trip notice. But when I answered, the voice on the other end was too serious. "Ms. Rivers? This is Mr. Fry from the front office. We noticed Eliza wasn't in school today, and no one called to excuse her absence." My breath caught. "What do you mean?" "She's with my parents. They should have dropped her off." There was a pause. "We haven't seen her this morning. We've tried calling your parents' home number, but there's been no response." I don't remember hanging up. I just remember running out of the hospital, still half in scrubs, my badge flapping against my chest. The 15-minute drive to Palmview felt endless. I called my mom's phone. Straight to voicemail. My dad's? Same. I tried Savannah just in case. No answer. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, I knew something was wrong before I even got out of the car. Both vehicles were gone. No porch light. No signs of life. I used my spare key and burst through the front door. "Mom? Dad? Eliza?" Silence. Then I saw the paper on the kitchen counter. A single sheet, lined. My mother's signature penmanship across the top. "Natalie, sorry, sweetie, we just couldn't take care of her. We've arranged for temporary placement until you're available again. You can contact Child Protective Services to make arrangements." No number, no location, no signature, just abandonment. My hands trembled as I tried dialing CPS. It took 3 transfers and nearly 20 minutes to reach someone who could even pull up a file. A woman named MS. Beltran, polite but distant, confirmed it. "Yes, we have a record of a child named Eliza Rivers being placed in emergency foster care last night." The reported guardians, Douglas and Irene Rivers, requested immediate placement, citing inability to provide care and stating the mother was unavailable indefinitely. Unavailable indefinitely. I repeated, my voice cracking. I'm her mother. I was working 3 night shifts. I told them exactly when I'd be picking her up. I understand this is upsetting, ma'am, Ms. Beltran said gently. But please try to remain calm so we can verify your identity and begin the reunification process. I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to drive to whatever office had processed this and demand to know how no one had checked. But instead, I did what every ER nurse is trained to do in a crisis. I breathed. I answered every question. I recited my custody paperwork from memory. I gave them my badge number, my shift reports, Eliza's medical records, her allergy prescriptions, everything. And as the sun rose over Palmview, I sat in my childhood living room, staring at the spot where my parents once kept a family photo on the mantel. It had been replaced by a candle display from Pottery Barn. It took 4 hours of non-stop phone calls, document verifications, and urgent pleas before CPS finally gave me the address. Eliza had been placed with an emergency foster family on the edge of town, people I had never met, who didn't know her, who had no idea she hated orange juice and was afraid of dogs that barked too loud. When I pulled up to the modest yellow ranch house, my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The woman who opened the door was in her 50s, kind-eyed and calm. "You must be Eliza's mom," she said softly. "She's in the backyard with my husband." I stepped onto the back porch, and there she was, my daughter, sitting on a patch of grass, gently tossing a ball toward an old retriever who couldn't care less. Her shoulders were hunched, her curls messy, her eyes vacant. "Eliza," I whispered. She turned. The moment her eyes met mine, she dropped the ball and ran. Her body collided with mine so hard I nearly stumbled back. She wrapped her arms around my waist and sobbed into my shirt. "Mommy, I thought you weren't coming back." My knees buckled. I dropped to the ground and held her, rocking her back and forth, whispering over and over, "I would never leave you. Never. I'm so sorry. I'm here now." We stayed like that for what felt like hours. Eventually, we moved inside where Mrs. Callahan, the foster mother, had prepared juice and snacks. Eliza sat beside me on the couch, clinging to my arm, afraid to let go. As she slowly began to talk, the pieces fell into place. "Grandma said you needed to take care of something important, and maybe you'd need a really long break," she whispered. She packed my pajamas and my nightlight. Then they dropped me off at a building and said nice people would look after me. But I didn't want nice people. I wanted you. My throat burned. I squeezed her tighter, brushing her hair away from her flushed cheeks. "They had no right to say that. You did nothing wrong. Nothing." Mrs. Callahan looked at me, eyes filled with a quiet kind of anger. "When they dropped her off, they never mentioned you. Never said you were returning. They presented themselves as her guardians, said they were overwhelmed and didn't know what else to do. They lied, not only to CPS, but to Eliza. Later, while Eliza watched cartoons in the next room, I finally looked at my phone again. A notification blinked at the top of my screen. Savannah had tagged our parents in a photo. There they were on a beach in Maui. My father teaching Jackson how to snorkel. My mother building a sandcastle with Madison, matching floral shirts, champagne glasses, laughter frozen in pixels. The timestamp? 30 minutes after Eliza had been handed over to Child Protective Services. I had always considered myself calm under pressure. Years in the ER had trained me to think clearly when others fell apart. But this wasn't a stranger coding in Trauma Bay 3. This was my daughter. And someone had deliberately endangered her. For vacation. After getting Eliza settled back at the Callahan's house for the night, her favorite blanket in hand and Webster the stuffed otter tucked beside her, I stepped outside to make a call I never thought I'd need to make. Melissa Grant picked up on the second ring. She was more than my closest friend. She was also one of the sharpest family court attorneys in St. Johns County. And when I told her what had happened, I didn't even have to ask. "They did what?" Her voice snapped through the phone like a whip. Natalie, that's not just morally repugnant. That's criminal. I want to file a report, I said, pacing the Callahans' porch. Not just with CPS, but with law enforcement. They lied about being Eliza's guardians. They falsified information. They left her. You have every right to, Melissa said. That's child abandonment, filing a false report, and possibly custodial interference. We'll start by documenting everything. That night, I didn't sleep. I created a digital folder on my laptop. I printed screenshots, Savannah's vacation posts with timestamps proving the trip had been pre-planned for weeks. I saved the intake form from CPS, the text messages, the photos of Eliza in the foster home, and even the receipt I'd given my parents listing her allergy meds and emergency contacts. The next morning, I called Detective Harper. I'd worked with him before. He handled family-related cases, and I'd seen him comfort domestic violence victims in the ER more times than I could count. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. He just listened. Based on what you're describing, he said slowly, there are definitely grounds for a formal investigation. The fact that they left the state complicates jurisdiction, but it doesn't protect them. I told him about the Maui hotel, the matching shirts, the timestamp on Savannah's post. They lied Harper, I said quietly. They told CPS I was unreachable, that I might not come back, and then they went to the beach. I'll get in touch with authorities in Hawaii, he said, but I'll need an official statement, and everything you've got. He didn't say it, but I could hear it in his tone. This case was different. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was methodical, cold. I looked back through the window, where Eliza now slept curled on the couch, her face finally peaceful. They didn't just lie about me, they tried to erase me. It happened exactly 72 hours after Eliza had been dropped at Child Protective Services. Detective Harper had coordinated with Hawaiian authorities using every scrap of evidence I'd given him. Flight confirmations, Savannah's social media breadcrumbs, hotel reservation details. Everything pointed to one place, the Oceanside Resort and Spa in Wailea, Maui. A 5-star sanctuary with oceanfront suites and an infinity pool that glowed at night. At 7:05 a.m. Hawaiian time, 3 officers from the Maui Police Department knocked firmly on the door of room 742. Security footage would later show the moment the door creaked open. My father, still in a resort bathrobe, hair uncombed, looked out with confusion that quickly twisted into alarm as Detective Barnes, the local lead, identified himself. Gerald Rivers. Barnes said evenly, "We need to speak with you and Irene Rivers regarding an incident involving your granddaughter, Eliza Rivers, and allegations of child abandonment." My father tried to shut the door. The officers didn't let him. Behind him, my mother appeared, her hair still in rollers, a silk robe cinched too tightly at the waist. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, her voice already trembling. "We made arrangements. We told them she needed care while her mother was unavailable." "You never contacted her mother," Barnes replied, holding up documentation from CPS. "You declared yourselves guardians and omitted critical custody information. Your daughter has since filed formal charges." Then the connecting door burst open. Savannah stepped in, followed by her husband Bradley, both in pajamas. The kids peeked from behind them, confused and silent. "What's going on?" Savannah demanded. "You told me Natalie knew." She turned on them, eyes wide. "You said she approved it." "She would have made a scene," my mother whispered. "You know how she gets dramatic." Even Savannah recoiled at that. Then came the excuses. "She has special needs," my father insisted. "She's difficult, demanding. We weren't equipped." "She's 8," I told Detective Harper later when he relayed the scene. "She needs an inhaler twice a year. That's it." When asked about the vacation, my mother fumbled. "We didn't mean to leave her. We just needed space." "You needed cocktails and a beachfront suite," Harper replied, deadpan. and you got them, while she slept alone in a stranger's house. Hotel guests began to gather near the elevators, whispering, filming. One couple approached the officers, quietly asking, "Did they really leave their granddaughter just to come here?" "Yes, ma'am," Barnes confirmed. "They did." Savannah stood frozen, watching it unfold. Her perfect vacation unraveling with each passing second. Her voice barely carried over the commotion. "What about Jackson and Madison? They're crying. You're ruining everything." The officers calmly escorted my parents from their luxury suite, bypassing the breakfast buffet they'd reserved and the snorkeling lesson they were scheduled for at 10. Back in St. Augustine, I received a short message from Detective Harper. Confirmed contact. Interview completed. Returning to Connecticut under police escort. They weren't handcuffed, but they might as well have been. The internet noticed. One hotel guest had filmed part of the confrontation and uploaded it with the caption, "Grandparents busted for ditching their granddaughter to vacation with their favorites. Family drama goes nuclear in paradise." It was spreading fast, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something close to peace. The day Eliza came home, the house didn't feel the same. Her room was still there, exactly as we'd left it, but the innocence had cracked. The pink, glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling no longer felt magical. Her nightlight flickered like a warning. Still, she smiled when she saw her pillow, her real one, and when I handed her Webster, the stuffed otter she'd taken everywhere since she was 4. She held him to her chest and whispered, "You came back for me. I never left you," I said softly. "Not even for a second." CPS required a final in-person verification at their office before restoring full custody, but Ms. Beltran fast-tracked the process. "We've reviewed the documentation," she said. "You're cleared to take her home, but we strongly recommend trauma counseling for both of you." I didn't hesitate. By the following week, Eliza began sessions with Dr. Elaine Cho, a child psychologist known for her work with separation trauma. After the first session, Dr. Cho asked to speak with me privately. "Eliza shared something today that concerned me," she said gently. She said her grandparents told her, "Sometimes mommies go away and don't come back. That maybe you were gone because she was too much trouble." Those words, they physically hurt. Not just the meaning, but the intention. The cold, premeditated cruelty it took to plant that idea in a child's mind. Dr. Cho saw the rage rise in my face. "She doesn't believe it anymore," she added quickly, "but it's important we keep reinforcing that it wasn't her fault." So I did. Every single day. I rearranged my work schedule to part-time, thanks to my supervisor Jennifer, who'd been quietly championing me since the incident. "Take whatever time you need," she'd said. "Family comes first, especially when they've been hurt." Financially, the change was manageable. Emotionally, it was necessary. We began creating new traditions. Sunday pancake brunches with Kelly, my best friend and fellow nurse, and her daughter Emma. Saturday library trips where Eliza could pick any book, no matter how silly or sparkly. Weekly movie nights with Judith, my ex-mother-in-law, who, unlike my own parents, had never stopped showing up. One night, as we were drawing constellations on a large piece of butcher paper for Eliza's space wall, she looked up and asked, "Are we a small family now?" "No," I replied, placing a sticker star over our heads. "We're just the kind that shines brighter with fewer people." She smiled, wide and certain, and returned to her drawing. No hesitation, no sadness. We were rebuilding from the ground up. But this time, everything we laid down was real, earned, solid, and stitched together, not by obligation, but by love. 3 days after they returned from Hawaii, sunburnt, sullen, and still half in denial, my parents stood in front of a judge in a packed county courtroom. I sat 2 rows behind them, Eliza's small hand wrapped around mine like a lifeline. The judge, Honorable Caroline Reeves, was not the kind to be swayed by tears or tailored suits. Her voice was firm, her posture straighter than a steel rod. You are charged with child abandonment, filing false statements to a government agency, and custodial interference, she read aloud. How do you plead? My parents' lawyer, a longtime acquaintance of my father's, stepped forward with a carefully rehearsed plea deal. 6 months probation, mandatory family counseling, community service at a local children's center. No jail time, no record if completed successfully. I didn't fight the deal, because the punishment I wanted wasn't jail. It was acknowledgement, and that came when the judge turned to my mother. Mrs. Rivers, would you like to make a statement? She stood, smoothing the hem of her beige cardigan. We meant no harm, Your Honor. We thought we were acting in the child's best interest. Natalie can be intense. We didn't want to interrupt her shifts. Abandoning a child isn't a scheduling conflict, Judge Reeves replied. It's a betrayal of trust. A child is not a suitcase you drop off when vacation plans come up. My father tried to salvage dignity. We just didn't think she'd overreact like this. But before the hearing ended, the judge offered Eliza a choice. If you feel safe, you may speak. She looked at me. I nodded once. Eliza stood, holding a small piece of folded paper in her trembling hands. She took a deep breath. When you left me, I thought it was because I did something wrong, she said clearly. I thought maybe I wasn't good enough, or that Mommy didn't want me anymore. My mother began to cry, but Eliza didn't flinch. I know now that none of it was true, and I'm trying to forgive you, but I need you to know that what you did made me feel invisible. And I never want to feel that way again. Silence filled the courtroom. Even Savannah, sitting in the back, wiped her eyes. It wasn't the apology I had waited for. It was better. It was power reclaimed. Afterward, my mother reached for Eliza. She stepped behind me instead. My father said nothing. In the weeks that followed, the story faded from headlines. The Hawaii grandparents' case was replaced by newer scandals and fresher outrage. But in our home, the change remained. Eliza smiled more, laughed more, danced around the living room again. And one night, as I tucked her in, she whispered, Mom, I'm not scared anymore when you go to work. I know you'll come back. I kissed her forehead and whispered back, always. We didn't return to the way things were. We created something better. Family dinners no longer included long drives to Palmview or sitting through awkward silences while Eliza picked at salad. Instead, we gathered around our own table, surrounded by people who had earned their place. Kelly and Emma, Judith, who never missed a movie night, even Mrs. Callahan and her husband stopped by one weekend with a basket of Eliza's favorite muffins. Eliza turned 9 that spring. She wanted a space-themed party, so we transformed the backyard into a galaxy. Silver stars hanging from the trees, a rocket cake, and constellation games. Before blowing out the candles, she looked around at everyone and smiled. Make a wish, Space Explorer, I whispered. I already got it, she replied. We're home. And she was right. Home wasn't a building. It wasn't defined by shared blood or old photo albums. It was wherever we were safe, where we were seen, where love showed up, especially when it was hard. My parents still attended court-mandated therapy. Some visits happened with a supervisor present at Eliza's request. Other days, she chose not to go at all, and that was okay. Her voice mattered now. Her boundaries were sacred. Savannah sent a card once. It said, I'm sorry. I see things differently now. I didn't respond. Some lessons don't need applause, just space to land. I kept journaling every night, not because I needed proof anymore, but because I wanted Eliza to know one day that I chose her every single time. That no vacation, no judgment, no betrayal could ever change that. She was never too much, and I was never unavailable. We were just surrounded by people who couldn't see us clearly until we stood up and made them. So now I ask you, have you ever had to protect someone you love from your own family? What gave you the strength to choose what was right, even when it meant walking away. Share your story in the comments. Someone out there might need it more than you know. And if this journey spoke to something inside you, hit like, subscribe, and stay for more stories about strength, survival, and the quiet kind of revenge that rebuilds everything they tried to destroy. Because sometimes justice isn't loud. It's a child finally falling asleep, knowing they'll never be left behind again.